Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast about politics, technology, art and design, featuring me, Michael Forrest.
And me, Ivanka Magic. It was my turn to speak then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I didn't warn you, but
you should know by now. It is episode 72.
I can edit out the spaces, so it's fine if it takes you a second. This week we're going to talk about... Well, this week, Ivanka's just sort of shared this video, but, we've both been paying attention to Rutger Bregman a lot recently, who is the guy that said taxes and everything else is bullshit on to the Davos people, and he wrote Utopia for Realists. And one thing he's been saying is, like, lots of people these days know what they're against, but they don't really know what they're for. So we thought we'd have a little brainstorm about what we're for, what we'd like, how we'd like things to be. Imagine a utopia, maybe not initially for realists, but like how would we like things to be given where we are right now? So I've got some headlines around sort of government, like what work would be like, medicine and health, things like that, education, and just money. Just what are all the kind of pillars of existence that we'd like to hit? I
think that's health, education, what is work, what is not being bored, I was thinking about it like this. Healthcare, education, living circumstances, homes, buildings,
how
you get about, how you get to spend your time, how you get to control your fate, how you vote.
Well, we're ready for some improvements.
Yes, so
something that was an incremental improvement over a kind of shit situation for a while, but now let's step it up. So yeah, we're just gonna have a talk, see how far we get.
Sounds good to me.
But first, how's it going, Ivanka?
It's going very well, Michael, I think. I always say that. Last week, I don't know if we've recorded since then, but I went to see Caroline Lucas talk at my local community centre because she's my MP. I'm blessed. And
hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed with a sensible MP. And the thing that it was an Extinction Rebellion stroke. Our community has quite an active green, grassroots green blah. It's my neighbourhood, so I'm fairly representative, I'd say. So we went out. So I went out. And there was some talks about how to talk about the climate crisis, and I didn't stay till the very end, and I was late, so I didn't see everything. But I did listen to Caroline Lucas speak, and the poor woman had been in Parliament all day. So this was a Friday evening at 7:30, and she must have been absolutely exhausted. But she had said she was coming, so she arrived and she was on time, unlike me. I felt very bad about that. And one of the things that I took away from what she said was that all these current constructs, these capitalist constructs that we're living within, are based on the premise that we are all selfish and self-serving. And as you and I often talk about, so is this we are far more cooperative as human beings and care far more about our communities and gain more from our communities and cooperation than the current narrative would have us believe. And it was basically, we are all nicer than everyone's making us out to be. Yes. And I think she didn't phrase it exactly like that, but I think that for me was a nice thing to take away from a talk by a mainstream politician. She's an MP in British Parliament.
It's like the Wikipedia person at the fake news thing I went to just sort of towards the end going, well, most of what's online is really positive.
Yeah.
And everyone's sort of going,
What?
and you
What?
go,
That is
like
crazy.
people are doing stuff for nothing left and right, like helping strangers all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So it really is a sort of a much smaller group of people that are trolling and, hacking and causing problems. And it's hard, it's easy to forget that.
You reminded me of a Guilty Feminist episode recently where Deborah Francis White was calling trolls. She was calling it trolling. I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't not hear this anymore. Now, every time you say the word, I'm just not listening to what you're saying because I'm trying to process. It's like, have I been saying it wrong all this time? Anyway, but it was it was really cool to go and see her. I felt good. I felt it was nice. And then I went off because we all remember my ski goddess holiday from last year, I'm sure, long-term listeners. But I went on this ski holiday design. It's for women who want to improve their skiing. It has various accoutrements of a holiday, but it's about the skiing. And I had a massive improvement in my skiing and my ability to enjoy the mountain. So I didn't mind praising the woman who owns it. And then I was like, you should get some of us back, because a lot of them are professional women who do stuff. I was like, you should, we could talk about how to help you more with your marketing. I did my usual getting enthusiastic about someone else's project. And then she invited us back for what she called the Ski Goddess Summit, because the brand is Ski Goddess. And so we're all people who have attended the course. And she had a web developer and a clothes designer, because obviously she needs uniforms and stuff like that. And it was really interesting because we did a bit of skiing and so we did, ski till lunch and then work. And there was a lot of work. We did really long days because I was also very concerned that I'd be going out under this false pretenses of helping her, but then we'd just have a nice chat over a glass of wine and nothing would happen. So, but obviously I wasn't the only professional woman who was able to, we talked about roadmaps and what can we do now and what could we do next and what are we aspiring towards. I mean, it was a really good workshop, and I felt very positive about the whole experience because these women all come from different backgrounds. But interesting in our group, so one woman works in the food industry, and I had. She's about 10 years older than me and has a much more corporate career behind her. That's sort of like running multiple factories and what have you. And I was like, so, climate change, veganism, is anyone in the meat industry actually bothered by the plant-based? Because she'd said plant-based is a massive trend at the moment. I was like, is anyone actually bothered? She was like, no. It's like, it's not really touching the food manufacturers yet. Right. Whilst they might be obviously looking to provide more plant-based options in a supermarket and talk about plastic and so apparently she said Tesco's did a really good briefing with suppliers about packaging and about plastics and talking about which was really heartening. They'd obviously taken it very seriously and sort of see themselves as sort of like taking their role of custodians of food from the manufacturers to the home quite seriously. And so they were because they have a lot of power, supermarkets, to make food manufacturers do all sorts of things. So, one thing was on the positive end of the scale, clearly putting pressure on supermarkets does have an effect. Equally, not enough. Climate change still isn't enough of a problem, or it's not acknowledged enough yet for that to have become a part of the requirements. And there's obviously much debate to be had in the food industry about how to feed people, growing population, blah, blah. So that was quite interesting. But then there was one in our midst. There's one woman that we encountered. Who sort of sat at dinner. She wasn't part. I hadn't met her before, and she just went, yeah, I don't believe we have anything to do with climate change.
Okay.
And so I didn't say. I did later on say to somebody else, I need a gold star for not saying a single word. I just sat there because I thought,
is that the right thing to do?
I was like, as much as I bang on about speaking up, in that moment, it would have completely ruined the whole thing. So I didn't. I just went, I didn't even say anything. It's my usual absolute silence. So then that weighed on me. Just the way it was said, I just couldn't think of a... Because then she immediately followed up with, don't get me wrong, I'm all into eco-living, but I don't believe that, that... I think it was the bit that she... And this is what I just didn't dig into, and I couldn't. I could have, of course. Because it was more like, I don't believe that we little ratty humans can either, save the earth or destroy the earth. Wow. So I was just like... so I struggle, and then it's obviously been preying on my mind that I didn't. Justifying my behaviour. The food industry woman, I've met her before, and the first time I met her, we didn't really dig into the food industry, but this time I felt more it's like this time I was quite happy to go, what about this? And because I got a little bit of a relationship built up with her, so I felt much more comfortable going, what about this? And whereas this woman, I'd only just met her and she was new to the group, and I think I would have totally alienated her, which is also not really...
Yeah,
Anyway.
I know you're probably worried about me sort of sitting here judging you or something, but honestly, I trust your judgment on this, and it just sounds like I'm sure you'll, I'm sure you did the right thing in the situation, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to dig into it next time. Maybe over like a side-by-side conversation. Like instead of sitting opposite somebody, if you're sitting next to them, it's actually easier to have a confrontational discussion, because it's less like... So like on a chairlift, sitting side by side, I can start a difficult conversation. And they can't escape. But yeah. How was your week, Michael? My week was very successful. Wow. I played that show on Tuesday, gave a talk, and played some music, did some singing, and it went down really, really well. And loads of people were very positive about it. And I really think, because the guy before me did actually a really good little sort of electronic modular synth set, like 20-minute set, that just sounded really great. But then I think just the fact that I was bringing vocals to it, bringing singing to it, just really did mean that it was sort of like a bit next level. It was, and I think this was a successful one, because I was just like, and I explained this to the audience as well, like I'm quite busy kind of tweaking knobs and things, so singing isn't my only job. So I sort of feel like, okay, let's just get an effects vocal processor thing that'll auto-tune and make everything sound nice and add little harmonies and things to it, just so that you're not having to deal with me being a bit off or a bit pitchy. And it really paid off, and just everyone was so like, just the fact that one guy was like saying, he's saying his friend was like, oh, where's he getting those vocal samples from? And he's like, no, he's singing it now. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's good. And this is, I think it was the last thing in the sort of pyramid of what I needed to do to get this thing that I'm trying to do working in the way it is in my mind. And just, I think the power of vocals is that people actually have the language to talk about it in a way that they just don't about when it's knob tweaking and harmonies and melodies and rhythms and all that kind of thing. They can just say, oh, I really loved your singing. And it's the reason I've worked to try and be able to do that, because I just felt like it's got to be in there, or the music is only really a fraction of what music is about. So that went down really well. So I'm quite pleased about that. And although, of course, I felt like it was going terribly when I was up there, so, Yeah. And also I finished my video, and, due to the postponing of our Friday recording, was able to put a lot more little flourishes into the production of the video on Friday. Because it's like a 15-minute video. I just thought, I'm just going to write a big script this time, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's a good resource for people, for musicians, people like me that want to play this sort of thing live, and it just takes you from how to get a gig or do something yourself right through playing, the mindset you need to be in, kind of preparing to get on stage, being on stage, coming off stage, and then like packing up. I think and I haven't seen like a huge uptake of it, but I have seen the people that do comment. I kind of go and click on their thing, and it's like, oh, you've got thousands of subscribers.
You're special.
Special people are liking it. So yeah, that's been good. So on to the topic. What is important to us as human beings? How do we want our lives to be?
Well, you can start like with old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is, at the very bottom is food and shelter.
Physiological, then safety, then love, belonging, then esteem, then self-actualization. I mean, you've really got to think that if safety or physiological needs aren't being met by the apparatus of the state, that really is just a...
They really are failing.
They've dropped the ball completely.
Yeah.
So
those bottom two, physiological, which includes health. Well, obviously I don't need to translate to you. Michael, let me explain the English language to you. No, so
physiological, food, water, warmth, and rest. It's like, how is it possible that we start? But we're not ranting about what's wrong, but we're just like, so in that, I think you sort of have to take it as a given that those things are one way or another taken care of. So
I would say that in a modern wealthy society, because a lot of these things that we learn, both from Mind the Gap and the Swedish professor with all his stats and Rutger Bregman and all these people, is that there is a lot of wealth.
Yes.
And we have created more wealth. And one of the things he referenced in that interview I saw with him was the fact that, so in the 30s, 40s, so I don't know when, in a blah, 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 insert date, an economist identified that we were generating more wealth. And as we were earning more and having more money, we would be able to work less. And he predicted like this 15-hour work week because... if you earn enough working just a couple of days. So, for people like me, I'm kind of achieving that. But for many other people, that's not that we're far from it. But I think the thing that this Maslow's makes you stop and think about is that, more and more people their physiological needs are being met and their safety needs, but there's still far too many who aren't.
Yeah, it's shocking that anyone, given the amount of wealth that exists.
Yeah.
There is no reason for us not to be able to support, give people. So I think tier 1, universal basic income is something I would like to see as a baseline for how you would sort of support those basic, certainly physiological needs. I should not feel like if something terrible happens to me, or I just really have had enough of the rat race or something, or I really just want to try something, I should not have to worry about how am I going to be able to feed myself. Yeah. The thing that I stumble on there is the whole warmth, rest, the housing aspect of that, and
because
is it true that there's a lot of empty property, isn't there? Is this something? Are we seeing people hoarding property in the same way that we're seeing them hoarding wealth?
Well, we're seeing some interesting things. For example, in central London, I've discovered as part of my social care projects, is that we're seeing people who have enormous property wealth because they happened in the 50s to be of an age where you buy yourself a 4-bedroom terraced house. And that 4-bedroom terraced house that was at that time perfectly normal and affordable for a working couple is now worth £8 million. But your income is still the pension that you would have had as a nurse or a policeman or whatever it was. So it's not enormous, but is big. So you've got this thing that is worth a huge amount of money. It's kind of paralysing you because you're afraid to, now that you suddenly can see that you've like got an £8 million house and you want to leave your children millions and, oh my God, we're all rich. But actually you're not using that wealth. So you're still living in that house that you can't quite afford with not enough money. You're not earning enough money to pay for a cleaner to come and help you clean it, or for somebody to help you cook, or you can't afford to make adaptations to your house because it's too big, you know, like for things like a handrail or something that will help you age comfortably. So people are like, they're paralyzed by this weird wealth that's not real. So that's happening. There's people that do have these homes that, you know, they are empty a lot of the time, or they've, you know, like all these kind of urban redevelopment of really expensive properties instead of properties people can live in, and this whole thing of people, you know, like again, Rutger Bregman, my new best friend, he talked about the fact that, you know, in New York in the 70s, which happens here in Brighton, the bin men go on strike. Within days, it's a state of an emergency. So 6 days of New York bin men striking caused a sort of like a national emergency type thing. Whereas in Dublin in the 70s, the bankers went on strike and basically nobody noticed. It's like they were on strike for 6 months. And it was
amazing. Let's leave them on strike.
It's like you know, the stuff we really need, and then the stuff we don't really need, and you know, but not having not being able to afford to be priced out of the community you're living in. You know, like you know, on my road, at my house, I think my house is ridiculously, like, for what it was bought for and what it is now worth. It's just stupid. You know, it's made up. So you're pricing, instead of living alongside people, all the people you need, you know, the people who are, you know, your nurses, social workers, teachers, blah, blah, blah. You need all of us are part of the same community.
Yes.
And we all...
So it comes back to that thing of you want things to be more local than they've ended up being. Certainly, and I know in London it's just a nightmare because you just can't, no one lives near each other.
No.
Like my friends, family are just scattered, and just an hour is just too far away, you know. But like this is reminding me of a point that Alain de Botton makes in one of the School of Life videos. Is this idea that like people are opposed to building, but actually people aren't opposed to beautiful buildings. They're opposed to ugly redevelopment property, you know, building. So if the government just kind of adjusted its way of, if you had a government that was doing what they do in, they sort of used the Netherlands as an example, like you have this kind of shape that you have to fit, but then you can do anything you like with it. So you get these really beautiful, so you can fit a lot of property in like a lot of accommodation into a small amount of space, and nobody minds if it's actually beautiful, if it actually looks good. No. And there's this sort of shoestring attitude that the government has to building, council flats and that kind of thing. That just, it's like no one wants fucking ugly buildings popping up left, right, and centre. But if they were nice buildings, I think it'd be nice. You know?
But Caroline Lucas raised this in her talk when I went to see. Did I tell you I went to see Caroline Lucas?
No.
She talked about the fact that, for example, because we're way off our targets for reducing our carbon emissions, and that's partly to do with the way we insulate our properties and our new builds. And I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, we were like on the cusp of it being law that every new build has to be built to a certain standard. And then the property development lobby gets involved as a little word with the ministers. And I think a lot of that, what gets built, is down to the people trying to make money out of it. And so if they won't behave with morals and with society in mind, we need to force them through regulation and legislation to behave in our interest. Like, I'll buy your house, but don't make it a shit house that is against like everything we know about climate policy and what we need in climate science.
So here's what we want in terms of accommodation, is what I'm thinking. Like, we don't want people to be able to hoard empty properties just for the sake of wealth. We shouldn't have that. That shouldn't be allowed. If there isn't enough accommodation, then we can build more, but make it beautiful, make it ecologically kind of like make it, build it to really high standards and do it really nice, and actually like design it in a way, living in Berlin, like sort of former East Berlin. I mean, but I think anyway, like the blocks you get there, they're sort of they're kind of functional looking from the outside, but they're designed to live in. Yeah. They're made for someone to live in. Even a studio flat that I was renting, it had like, I discovered this whole storage area above the hallway, like I didn't even expect initially. And there's a sort of central area that's sort of like, with trees and that kind of thing. And it's
a lot of those utilitarian buildings actually have utility.
Yeah, and they do. And the problem is where you have stuff that was built for like the house I live in, it's like we're in kind of half of it, and it's been not very well kind of like divided up, really. So we're always kind of living in these cramped, kind of awkward spaces that they've carved up a larger property rather than just kind of designing something for the size it's going to be. I noticed that in Oslo as well. Like we stayed in a studio, but it had like this bed up on the mezzanine and kind of a room, and it just felt like a home. Whereas like in London, you get used to just these, well, just in the UK even, you just get used to these places that are just awkward and just not very nice to live in. You kind of make the most of it, but you can get it takes the piss sometimes. Some of the places I've been shown by the Foxtons people. So like maybe, and you think about China, they put up a lot of blocks. I don't know to what standard, but they seem to be. So I don't know how much you want stuff that isn't really fit for purpose being torn down and replaced with better stuff, but maybe that is.
I think I hope people, there must be some maths around it. But I was thinking about one of the things we suffer with. This is what my train of thought was like. Why is Oslo better? Blah, blah. And I was thinking, well, Britain's a very old country. It's got a lot of old property. But then, so is every.
Well, Amsterdam.
Germany's an old country, but then it got smashed up.
But you think about Amsterdam, like just the case study there is the cycle lanes, like the cycling in the city. They used to be like London. It's an old place. There's loads of traffic. People were getting killed all the time on bikes, and they went, okay, we're going to just say. No, that's not good enough, and we're going to make the cars go round the long way, and we're going to have the middle of the city be really cycling friendly, and they just made that change. They did that thing that you can do if you put your mind to it as a state. And I think the variable shouldn't be do I have somewhere to live or not. The variable should be okay. Maybe if you're kind of not doing as well professionally or whatever, like maybe you do have a bit less choice of where it's going to be, but you should still have somewhere to go, whatever happens. In our workshop that we were doing, one of the things that came up was that if where you're living is not adequate, it's very hard, it's very stressful, and therefore it's very hard to be creative about solving other problems in your life. Basically. Exactly. So, and that ties into safety and security, and it really is like just where you live. And so I think there's the actual physical building, the physical space that you can live in, and also the community that you're kind of connected to. It shouldn't just be, and that's another point that Alain de Botton makes is like a lot of new builds in London, they don't meet the ground. They don't have sort of like commercial areas. They don't have like shops and like communal spaces on the ground floor. They just kind of like they want to sell it all as places to live. But then you get these, and you're seeing that in Queen's Park, like where I am, like Maida Vale. A lot of these places they put up these blocks, but there's no shops or anything. So there's no sort of community kind of created in those things. So you've sort of got to go somewhere else and just...
Yeah, I read quite a shocking Guardian article a couple of weeks ago, last week. There's, how now they make a lot of these new developments have to have some affordable housing or social housing in the development.
Yeah.
But they had 2 separate playgrounds. So the kids from the poor houses were not allowed to play in the playground for the rich kids. And it's like, I did follow the story a little bit, and there was a little bit of debunking. There's like, however... that there was even enough information in the world for that to exist as a headline in a newspaper is shocking beyond belief.
That's an episode of High Maintenance, actually. Like, these people sort of move into this block, but there's the sort of like premium tier facilities that you're not. I mean, I think it was like affordable housing or whatever that they were in, but then there was all this kind of like stuff that only people that were kind of like paying the premium were allowed access to, and it's pretty gross, isn't it?
It is
and
pretty
they have
gross.
2 different entrances, and like the point is, I just read this thing of like it was a Disney heiress woman like talking about what it's like to grow up super wealthy. And she was saying, like, if I was queen of the world, I would ban private jets, because it really is a way of just whole aspects of existence that you can just completely ignore once you can fly privately. And the disconnection of a private jet is just sort of, she thinks is really poisonous.
She's quite I've seen her speak, and I think she's quite a civilised. You know, she's somebody who's well aware of the privilege of her wealth. As far as I can establish, and is not afraid to use it for good. You
just talk about that thing, and it is that thing you have with, I had it with Shuttleworth, was like, oh, it's quite down to earth. It's quite, it seems quite cool. It's very easy to seem like that. And it's really only when the pressure is on that you find out like how they actually see you. But and she's sort of saying in this thing like, you just have to crack a couple of sort of like fairy princess jokes and people just like love you for it. It's just quite, it's very easy to appear down to earth as a rich person. But it's not really the point.
Okay, so we would like everybody to have somewhere to live that was allowed them to come home, shut the door, and go,
Yeah, and homes should be homes, not like awkward things. So that's one aspect of the utopian vision, and how does that relate to? So what are we doing? Because I've always felt like I would like people not to be choosing what they do every day based on whether it's going to pay enough, and be able to choose what they want to do based on, is that the thing that they want to do?
Yeah, and is that the thing that is going to... I immediately take it down to like, of course, nurse, doctor, and then it goes artist, or I don't know, somebody who really wants to be good at... And I can see how, if you want to make art, and this is not directed at you in any way, shape or form, so any comments that I make are not to be taken personally, but it's like, so I agree with you, and then I'm sort of channeling all the people going, what? So you expect me to go to work and do a thing, well, so that you can sit at home and paint pictures? Well, yeah. And I think it's quite in places with no art, they are not good places to be.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, if the more people that get to be artists, the better your life gets to be. Like, you get to see more nice things.
You get some music that makes you, makes your heart resonate, and you get both physically and emotionally. You get beautiful things to look at. You get all this kind of stuff. But I mean, Rutger Bregman did reference bullshit jobs. And I don't know if that's a meme that I don't know about, but he was talking about, people who've got all these university degrees and then they've got these jobs where they just send emails to people all day long. And it's like, I mean, that's one of the fortunate aspects for me of doing with these really short contracts.
Yeah.
Is I haven't got time to send empty emails to people going, hi, further to your email that you sent me yesterday. So, and I will have to go stand up and resolve. I was talking to this young fashion design near graduate who was on our retreat summit, last week, and she was saying how one of the places she did her internship, they had to ban people from setting up meetings and physically like institute a policy of stand up, walk across the office and go and ask somebody something, because everyone was spending all their time going to meetings. So no meetings were allowed on a Friday, because obviously as a designer, you actually need uninterrupted thinking time.
Yeah.
There is something about bullshit jobs and time spent proving that you've done work.
Yeah. Time, like the idea that work can, because I'm halfway through David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs at the moment. I do know who actually wrote it. But just this idea that you're supposed to like look busy all the time. This idea that whereas like, you know, like you kind of go back to a feudal existence, like farming, you kind of do a big burst of it at a certain time, but you have quite a lot of sitting around for the rest of the year. And that's kind of how we work in terms of work. And like, even for me, like I have to accept that I can't be 100% productive every day when I have my sort of time of my own, but that you just have to trust yourself that you will have these kind of ebbs and flows of sort of intense effort and then a little bit of a gap. And that's how it should be. And then, so this idea that you're supposed to look busy the whole time.
Yeah,
and
9 to 5 every day.
Yeah. Bill Hicks has a joke. He said he hates how bosses tell him to look busy. And he goes, you make more than I do. Why can't you pretend I'm working? But I don't think everyone would immediately want to be an artist anyway, and and one of the things I've been trying to sort of encourage Sharon to think about more as a real thing is she has a little dream of just, having sort of opening a craft shop and being able to sort of spend the day sort of ordering in nice different sort of craft supplies and then kind of dealing sort of talking to customers and sort of doing all that kind of thing. And, just like a fair price for a fair thing. And that's sort of her idea of something she'd really like to do. And I'm sort of like, let's have a little fantasize about that a bit. I can have my studio. You can have your sort of shop near, I don't know, in Queen's Park or something. And we can sort of hang out for a bit some days. And like, I can help you with your kind of online presence. And I can, if I've got sort of a big idea, I can just kind of like go on into the studio and kind of work on that for a bit. But then I can come out and we can, and that sounds like a nice existence to me. I quite like to be able to do that. And, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but I had a bit of a go at her yesterday morning when I found out she'd bought a lottery ticket, and she's like, "Oh, look, I won 40 quid on this lottery." I was like, "What? Why are you buying a lottery ticket?" I was like, what were you feeling that made you buy that?" And she was like, "Oh, well, I was just kind of thinking about this shop thing, just kind of fantasizing about that." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't want that to be
a lottery
in the realm of fantasy. I don't want you to have to feel like you have to." Like something has to qualitatively change in order for that to be a realistic idea. Lots of people open shops, and lots of people a lot less smart than you open shops. But it can feel like just a fantasy to get the thing that you want to do, even if that thing isn't particularly. There's always shops are a thing that shouldn't seem like an impossible dream.
No.
And then I just to round out that, the way I kind of was like, I'm sorry, for having a go at you for that was kind of really, I said, I had my Bitcoin fantasy recently, and sometimes a little bit of like, okay, let's imagine that I've got £100,000 all of a sudden, what is my shopping list sort of thing? And then realizing just from having that freedom to think about it is then you can still end up with stuff that you could actually do. So it's like, it's not all bad, but like, I also think, like, why does that have to be in the realm of fantasy for people, for anyone, really, to just do something cool? And like, it's like
totally, yeah.
And it's like I wouldn't spend all my time making music. You can't. It's impossible. But I'd like to be able to just, maybe I can kind of develop the happiness app without having to worry about how quickly I can monetize or how am I going to get other people to work on it.
I think I would still like to do this sort of, 2 or 3 a year of government projects to, like take a policy and work out how to make it happen. I find that immensely satisfying. I think I would still, there might be other people or other things that I would do that I wouldn't have to charge for, that I would enjoy. Like if I knew all my bills were covered, my basic survival. But equally, I think it's not even about the amount. it's about the no stress. The removal of this like survival pressure is not the same as pressure to, think of a bigger, better idea. Nothing is stopping you still from coming up with something amazing and being the most famousest person in the world about, do you know what I mean? It's like, there's a tipping point where the stress of survival massively inhibits your ability to think. And then it goes, well, even in that poverty thing we talked about, like the people who do fruit picking and the fruit and famine, the feast and famine part of their lives, literally if you IQ test them, I'm sure we've discussed this.
The IQ drops points. Rutger talks about it as well.
The IQ drops just because of I've got no, it's like impossible to think. So if we bring everyone up, imagine how creative we would be as a species
I would fucking love
if people were just trying to work out how the fuck to get food on the table.
And not having to spend, 40 hours a week on bullshit that they're not allowed to, like they're explicitly forbidden from. Even though there's not any real work to do, they're also forbidden to kind of do their own thing. And it's just like, it's just not healthy for anyone. We're not robots. We're not automata that you kind of wind up at 9 a.m. and then they kind of keep going till 5 and then we're finished. That's not really how humans are made. No. So that would be work, if work could be a bit more human. And kind of get out of this industrialised way of thinking.
What you're talking about in terms of that feudal times with the like periods of really hard work and not hard work and times when I'm sometimes really envious of some of my Herzegovinian family, because even though they don't have the same privileges I do in terms of having the money to travel around and do stuff, but they spend huge chunks of their lives just hanging out with each other and talking to each other, and there's no like, oh well, I can talk to you now but then I've got to go off and do such and such, and trying to when the younger ones come over here, they're utterly shocked by the way like Nick and I live our lives racing from a thing to the next thing, you know what I mean, and we don't even have like mad crazy corporate jobs or factory jobs where someone's counting your hours. We are within this world of work insanity. We are incredibly privileged, the two of us.
Yeah, me too. Like, I'm certainly very happy with my situation at the moment, where I can, I can take half an hour here and there to just sort of, as something comes to mind, and just kind of look at it without worrying that I've got to look like I'm, busy. Yeah,
look busy. Don't let anyone see what you're looking at on your computer. Yeah. I mean, come on.
You sort of imagine this kind of worst case scenario of everyone just kind of plays video games all day long and, gets high. But I don't think that's at a certain point that gets boring. I think, however, and I think it's the sort of feeling like you don't really have any other options, maybe is a reason that you're just like, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah. I think that then takes us up to the next levels up Maslow's, because we then talk about sort of love and belonging and esteem and self-actualization. Yeah. Along with this universal basic income has to come education.
Yeah, yes.
Really good education that opens your mind to all the possibilities, to all your potential. And there's going to be people who just want to play computer games and get stoned.
But I think but when you look at those people, that as they do it more, they're going to want to be the best at it. They're going to want to get better at it. And you do see this on YouTube. You see all these, like, here's like speed running, it's called, like, where it's like, how quickly can you do the Super Mario kind of thing, and like people get really creative with it, and there's community, and that's just as valid a human existence as setting up a shop or being an artist. It's so even if it's an artificial construct, it's like it's still just as meaningful.
Well, I learned this week, I had no idea at all that they're like world championships for people who play like FIFA.
Oh, yeah.
And they can command as much, if not more, as the professional sports person. Like, there literally is a whole sports world of people who play things
Big games
online.
And we don't look down at sports people and
No.
and that's just the same. Some are more or less physical, but a chess grandmaster seems to be respected. So why
Hugely
shouldn't someone
respected.
that's really good at FIFA? So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And as why shouldn't that be a valid existence? And if you're into it, you're into it, and then you might not be very good at it, and then you probably kind of lose interest and kind of start looking out into. I don't think there's this. Oh, people are just going to stop. People like gaming is quite a social thing these days.
Well, I also think that wanting to be really, really good at a thing or being really into a thing is really important. It doesn't actually really matter that much. And that's partly why people get radicalized, really, is that come over here and be part of this thing. As long as the things that people get really into are sort of either certainly not detrimental to the world, but as you say, if you're part of a community and you've got more people engaging with you, that's, I think, a perfectly valid endeavour, as long as it doesn't result in violence towards others.
Obesity.
You remind me of a quote, a Roald Dahl quote. I began to realise how important it was to be an enthusiast in life. If you are interested in something, no matter what it is, go at it full speed, embrace it with both arms, hug it, love it, and above all, become passionate about it. Lukewarm is no good, said Roald Dahl. But, I think that's got some legs.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, and that sort of brings me back to my little YouTube series, which I kind of like. Usually, often it's someone else's passion for something that gets you interested in it, and it maybe is less important what that is. Just testament to that is just how interested in Star Wars people seem to get.
Yeah.
You sort of go, well, okay, let's see this. Let's see what's going on here. What's this all about? Just to sort of tie this back to education, tie this back to health and medicine and sort of like safety and, police, that kind of thing. Rutger Bregman does talk about the price of poverty. And the more people you have like below the poverty line, the more it costs in the health service, the more it costs to police that. If you just kind of like put some money in to kind of solve poverty, then you actually you get it back pretty quickly at the other side.
Yeah. There are numbers to attach to this. Like even off that project I did with the retirement properties. So the retirement properties in our particular study were directed towards people who could afford to buy one. So obviously that takes you to a certain demographic. But the people who go and live in these specialist retirement communities cost the NHS on average £1,115 less per year, because the people are more, actively engaged in a community, living in age-appropriate housing, living in housing that's built to our standard where they're warm enough, cool enough, all that kind of stuff. But suddenly, they literally cost us less money because they're looked after.
And this is stuff that we kind of know how to do. It's easier. Building nice homes is something we're much better at than fixing dodgy knees and
it's
heart
much easier.
bypasses.
Much easier to build a house with no trip hazards than to, spend weeks putting someone back together or giving them a new hip or all that kind of.
Let's just touch on capitalism, liberalism.
Oh yes,
I've been watching Philosophy Tube. Who's another connected to ContraPoints, connected to H-Bomber guy. I'd sort of avoided him a little bit because he's got a funny looking face, but actually does seem to have and a couple of slightly self-indulgent videos. But he's got some really good series about sort of the basics of certain philosophical things. But he goes into what liberalism is all about, and I never realised quite, because we have liberal Democrats, and I don't know if that's even but Thatcherism and a lot of these things, liberalism is basically a sort of capitalism mindset. It's really closely tied into that, and this the idea that the market will solve our problems, and it's the embracing of that capitalism, that liberalism that has led to massive inequality. And I think, you know, a future society where things are put together properly should be one that does not allow those sorts of wealth inequalities to exist.
Met some people this, last 2 or 3 days who most of the year live in Ibiza and run fitness retreats and do catering and all that kind of thing. And basically the locals but there's a massive problem with squatting because of this empty house thing. And also, instead of renting to a local, people are putting their properties on Airbnb. So they're not... because I think that's sorry, we could go back into it, but I think that's quite interesting because I Airbnb my house when I'm not in it.
Yeah.
But I'm not giving my house over to Airbnb. Do you know? Because I thought it was invented for that.
Yeah.
That kind of like go and experience living in someone else's house somewhere else in the world. Yeah. And I'm fully up for that. And I'd say the majority of people that come and stay in our house, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to experience Brighton. But that's a big difference between that and not allowing locals to rent it because you want to make the Airbnb money.
Airbnb, my new overlords. It is an efficiency mindset, right? It is let's make the value of our property more efficient so that when we're not in it.
When we went off on our motorcycle trip, we rented out our house for proper tenancy agreement for that.
Right.
And that's actually, for me, more risky because it's more likely that someone will trash my house. And we did have to do a hell of a lot of cleaning when we got back. Right. Because, you can't enter in. I personally don't, this whole deposit protection, clean, blah, 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 bollocks. You can't make somebody clean your house. So we just, here's your deposit, laters. Anyway, there's a hell of a lot of cleaning to do. Whereas with that Airbnb, because I'm reviewing them and they're reviewing me, I feel much more confident that they are going to respect my house. Right. Weirdly. But, it's a funny little... If it's your actual home that you're trying to release to someone, it's different because we also rent a property separately, but that's proper tenancy agreements and all that. And that's different because that's very clearly that's not my home. It's not got my stuff in. But I also, with them, have this big thing about, look, this is your home. Yeah. You have to tell me when things are broken so I can mend them for you because otherwise... I'm not here to have you live in squalor so I can claim. It's like you have to tell me because otherwise I end up with something that's a much bigger problem because you were afraid to tell me because you've been conditioned by the market. If you report a problem, you're going to get charged for it. It's like, so it's quite there's something completely wrong with the way the legalities of renting and all that business.
Well, let's end by sort of talking about a thing that comes out of that and something that makes me think about. In Berlin, in Germany, they have very strong protections for tenants. So it's like once you're living somewhere, I think it's quite hard to get you out again, kind of thing. Like they protect you, but and then when I moved to Berlin, I was looking for rental properties and it was like, what's going on here? And there was no sort of like obvious estate agents in the same way that you have in London. And then what I discovered was it's actually the market is for sublets. So you have to look for someone who's subletting their property rather than attempting to get a rental thing where there'll be like, dozens of people, hundreds of people after this one place, because if they get it, they're sorted.
They've got it. Right.
But it just kind of triggers that whole thing of any system you create, people will start to like look for the loopholes and they will look to kind of ways to game it and they'll look for ways to sort of like make things easier for themselves. Like this is going to happen. So the thing I would imagine for a sort of future society is that the way we've built things in the past, it's like I look at this in terms of software architecture where you create a system that runs on a machine that has a very definite sequence of states that it can have, and it is very kind of rigid about how it makes decisions. While in law you have this body of rules that you've created, but it kind of ultimately comes down to a judge who is a human brain kind of going, okay, I think this is this, because everything is more complicated in the real world. So if you try to, the more stuff you try and turn into a sort of machine-like rule, the more ways there will be to kind of work around that. Because, you know, once you've sort of put your peg in the ground, then people will kind of find ways around it. And you can keep putting more pegs in, but then you just get something that makes no bloody sense. And then you have to have this entire legal system of people who've trained there, you know, for years to be able to kind of even work and understand anything. The way I would like to see it is like some next generation AI-fueled tech that brings we bring that set of laws, the set of the values of the society, down to a list that anyone can understand, much like Germany's constitution. That is something that anyone can pick up and kind of get through, and like it's a few pages and it can look beautiful. And then you have a slightly more fuzzy logic way that you can enforce that and test that, and in evolving specifics against a set of values that we've all agreed on, rather than trying to solve it all with sort of rigid rules that can then be kind of exploited and worked around. This is, I don't know, how does that sound to you? Does that sound crazy?
But I think that's it. I think that's absolutely what we need. It's that thing that I said last week, like go around Guildford. Does everyone believe everyone should have a good education? Yes, we do. Does everyone believe that you should have free healthcare? Yes, we do. Oh, therefore you're a socialist. No, you're not. You're not a socialist. You're just a human who... you know, once everybody understands the value of everybody having at least what they need, you know, and I think that's a really good way of flipping. I think the conversation needs to stop. And I had this conversation with my brother and sister recently because I'm a member of the Labour Party, and my brother's like, yeah, and my sister's like got into it but not a member, la la la, and he was like. And I was saying, you're arguing with me about like the fact because it's called branded socialist, but actually, what if we got rid of all these labels and just stood for the things that we stand for? It's a much easier conversation.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I don't know if there's any academics doing, because I think this is, you run simulations and you kind of like, let's figure out if we can, is someone doing this? Is someone kind of going, okay, like if we put this in and we sort of simulate that there's millions of people, even if it's kind of crude, can we like figure, can a machine kind of like figure out how to solve this?
In what way are we going to break it? We humans with our mad inventiveness. But you know, on the subject of subletting, as a landlady, is not a property magnate, I'd be quite happy with that.
Right, because then you don't have to manage it.
Go for your life, mate. Just as long as I get because I've tried to set the rent pretty reasonably and all that business, and I was like, yeah. Tell me what needs to be fixed, I'll fix it. You deal with all the people who want to or don't want to live with you. Cool.
One of the biggest things we have to just somehow figure out how to resolve is you say something like universal basic income to someone and they start imagining it for themselves and they're just thinking of all the ways that they like use that and what they do. If you ask people what they do, they think it's a brilliant idea for them, but everyone says that it would make other people lazy.
And so on that bombshell,
we have this idea that other people wouldn't do good things with it, and if we could sort of like deprogram that assumption and look at the numbers, like everyone. Look, we asked everyone, and everyone was like, "Yeah, we think that I would do something really good with this." So, what are they lying, or how are we going to?
But I think it's because they can't imagine it. And in a very privileged way at the moment, the way I've set up my life for that, and you have, we kind of we're sort of able to fake it a little bit because we don't work full time. But we do loads of stuff with. I mean, when I'm in Croatia, I kind of often work in the mornings, and when I'm, like on whatever, it might be recording a podcast because that's not work. I do stuff, and then sometimes I do things that are for money. But then I'll go off. I do loads more cycling, and I do loads more running, and I go out paddleboarding, and I pick up rubbish, and I have time to do things and. Go and talk to the mum, try and make friends with the mums in the village and hang out in the playground. Like, I don't think you'd sit on your bum doing fuck all.
Yeah, and this broken assumption that if something doesn't earn you money, it doesn't have value.
Yeah.
It's just we need to get past that as a society.
Yeah.
This podcast, as an example, like it might not make any of us money, but it certainly has value, right? If not,
well, I love it. I think it's brilliant. But yes, it does. I mean, it starts conversations with people, and whatever. Even if we only, because I think the truth. I had a coffee as well with an academic friend of mine. I might be doing a project with her over the summer, because she looks about sustainability in the creative process.
Yeah.
And she talked about the fact that really, we were talking about the Extinction Rebellion and the fact that we're not really in a position to go off and get arrested and do all this other stuff. She said, but, even it all comes down to community. So if our little podcast creates a small community of people who are thinking about these things, we're adding value. If I do a clothes swap with the mothers on my street, I'm adding value to my little community. We're stopping some shopping, we're stopping some consumption, you know what I mean? It's like it's all the answer to all of these problems are community and cooperation. But that community doesn't have to be in the traditional sense anymore, I think, of church. It can be a gamer community. Something
we haven't talked about is religion or like those kinds of rituals, but let's maybe we can do
we
that
haven't
next
got
time.
Up the, up the
we haven't gone up to the top yet. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
If you like the podcast, come to grandpodcast.com. If you want to find Ivanka, where can they do that?
Find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com. Please come and watch my new video. The thumbnail says Get Out of the Studio, and it's about it's sort of a guide to playing to booking a live electronic music gig through to sort of like playing it through to packing up afterwards. But I think just come and watch it because it sort of gives you a little bit of insight into all the work that goes into doing something that you might not have thought that was a thing. But I'm quite proud of how that's come out. So come and if you just come to michaelforestmusic.com, you can find it there, or you can search for me on YouTube. So please come and watch that. That is my plug.
I've got nothing to plug right now, but what I would like you to do, if you have just a few moments, to do some stars, some ratings, some reviews on our podcast, wherever you listen to them. If you are minded to write a review, please do, or drop us a little email or tweet at us or do something that helps us know what you're thinking.
Yes, please.
And whether or not we should do more of something and less of something else, and that kind of thing. It would be really helpful. Or then tell your friends about our podcast, because, we're trying to save the world one listener at a time.
And subscribe. If you subscribe, it'll keep coming down. So please come and subscribe if you have not already. And thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.